wild. And the other candidates aren't being briefed, but one is the former deputy prime minister. So that's, I mean, isn't that weird? Very, very interesting stuff going on there. Chinese infiltration is super serious and long-standing, and people were talking about it this morning and talking about trade trips that Dalton McGuinty took from Ontario to China, and nobody batted an eyelash at all. Nobody cared. Everybody was like, oh yeah, seems totally normal. Have fun in China, Dalton. It's good to see you have fun. Weird, right? The whole thing is strange. France doesn't want a ceasefire with Ukraine, and the EU announces $800 billion for a standing army. They want their own army, and they're saying, we're going to work with our NATO partners, and we're putting together this army, and if Russia and the United States normalize their relations and declare peace, well, we just might start a war anyway. So, I don't know. Both, there are other people saying ceasefire in Ukraine is even more dangerous than continuing to fight. We have to continue to fight because Russia might invade people later. Okay, the whole thing is seeming like the globalists really, really want their war. Danielle Smith is on board with removal of booze from shelves. Fentanyl is just fine though. And it's interesting because I think that Trump is opening up, he really is opening up the Russian market. And I think that he can replace a lot of the things that he's no longer getting from Canada from Russia and cheaper. Right. And so that'll be and Russia's interested in doing that. And that pulls Russia away from China. Right. And that's another one of those goals that politically in the world leaders talk about. Oh, you don't want to drive Russia into China. We don't want to have policies that drive Russia into China. So having a deal like we're going to buy all your potash is going to connect the United States and Russia in a way that they haven't been in a while. And that's good for world peace, because if they're economically intertwined, then it's less likely they'll go to war, right? And so very interesting stuff going on there. Ownership from China to Blackrock. The Panama Canal, Trump was talking about how the Panama Canal is going to be moved and the United States is going to take ownership and blah, blah, blah. And now Larry Fink owns it. And it was just $22 billion, which seems like a steal. Seems like very, very cheap. So I don't know what's going on, but Blackrock bought control of the Chinese ports, and China sold Blackrock control of the ports that they formerly controlled. And so it's interesting. We'll look at that as well. The BC budget, we'll look at some criticisms of that in our grab bag of governance. And we've got to start on tariffs. Yesterday, I reported that Trump was thinking about walking back the tariffs on day one of the tariffs in Canada and on Canada. And that was kind of the case. Not really. It didn't happen. Everybody said no. Trump said, listen, we want to do a pause on the tariffs for car parts and cars and things. And I guess Doug Ford said no. And that's interesting. And Justin Trudeau had a call with Trump. And after the call, this is the Truth Social that Trump posted. So there's lots to get to. Let's get to it first. We're starting at tariffs. Donald Trump says on Truth Social, Justin Trudeau of Canada called me to ask what could be done about tariffs. I told him that many people have died from fentanyl that came through the border of Canada and Mexico, and nothing has convinced me that it has stopped. He said that it's gotten better, but I said that's not good enough. The call ended in a somewhat friendly manner. He was unable to tell me when the Canadian election is taking place, which made me curious, like what's going on here. I then realized he's trying to use this issue to stay in power. Good luck, Justin. And then he continued, for anyone who's interested, I also told Governor Trudeau of Canada that he largely caused the problems we have with them because of his weak border policies, which allowed tremendous amounts of fentanyl and illegal aliens to pour into the United States. These policies are responsible for the death of many people. So that's it. That's what Trump says after yesterday. And very, very interesting. CBC News is reporting Finance Minister LeBlanc says Canada won't negotiate a compromise on U.S. tariffs, rejecting a suggestion from a U.S. official to, quote, meet in the middle. So I guess it was trying to trigger a renegotiation of USMCA or who knows what, with a tighter focus on fentanyl and border control, and Canada being the 51st state. Who knows? Steve says, this reaction from LeBlanc correlates to my assessment that the Trudeau regime wants a trade or tariff war for political reasons. They want to run an election campaign against Trump because they can't run on their dismal record, and they'll lose against Poilievre, but they just might win against Trump, right? And so if everybody's running against Trump, and indeed Poilievre is also running against Trump, well, you don't change horses midstream, right? You just don't. Here's Letnick, and he's responding to all of this kind of crazy stuff coming out of Canada. And he says, Trudeau's just done. Like he's at the end of his term. He's finishing out his term, and I'm sick and tired of all the crazy stuff he keeps saying. Here's Letnick.
Thinking about that, we'll see what we do tomorrow.
Prime Minister,
they're talking to us.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau today said that Donald Trump is trying to cripple the Canadian economy in order to annex it. What do you say to that?
Justin Trudeau is running the end of his term, and I don't really want to think about the ridiculous things he's said in the last couple of days. It's sad. It's time for him to go, and let's move on and have a new government in Canada. Thinking about that, we'll see what we do tomorrow.
Sad, time for him to go, and it's time to have a new government in Canada, right? And that's, I mean, they're not wrong. He's not wrong, and it's interesting that he's talking about that, and he's not taking the bait, right? And the question was, did you hear what he said about Donald Trump trying to tank Canada's economy in order to annex Canada? And Letnick was weighing a couple of different responses there, like, oh man, how do I know that Trump keeps talking about this 51st state thing. How do I dodge this annexation question? Because there are people out there who think it's in process. I think it's inevitable. I don't know that it's in process now, although a lot of people like that Canada's in probate. A lot of other people have pointed out that probate only applies to people, right? It doesn't really apply to a state like Canada. But we'll see. I mean, we'll see what's going on. But I think that we're in store for big changes. I don't know what those changes look like, but I don't think status quo under Trump is going to be allowed to continue. And so buckle up, but I don't know what that looks like. I'm certainly not saying, oh yeah, we're in the midst of changing, into the 51st state or changing from X to Y. I don't know, but it seems like Letnick was a little cagey there. He didn't want to engage, and he found a way to throw shade at Trudeau and not answer the question. So Rex Glacier is responding to this National Post article. 8 years ago, in the face of trade threats during Trump's first term, Canadians were having similar conversations about diversifying our exports and capitalizing on our vast energy resources, yet virtually nothing was done. And so, yeah, that's absolutely true. Nothing was done. And it's pretty wild that we've had this conversation many times before, and they promise the world, oh, we're going to build pipelines, we're going to build this, we're going to build that. And then they do absolutely nothing, which is kind of, I think, what they did to Trump. Oh, yeah, we're definitely going to do a lot about the border security and the fentanyl. And then, hope that he forgets about it in 6 months. And then when they say, no, we did, we appointed a fentanyl czar, and he took some pictures in front of a helicopter that we rented, right? Like, sorry, that's actually not doing anything and pretending that you did. And that's even worse than not doing anything. So Rex says this should be the conversation and why Trudeau did nothing about it. Hate Trump all you want, but you can't hate Trudeau enough for ignoring this, for just allowing this to happen, because they did. Here's Kelly. She says Ontario Premier Doug Ford says his decision to rip up the contract with Elon Musk's internet service is permanent and won't be reversed again, even if Canada's tariffs war with the United States is resolved. Premier Ford's office says he will not be pausing or changing any tariff countermeasures in response to a 1-month tariff delay for the auto industry. Those measures include ripping up a $100 million deal with Elon Musk's Starlink internet service, removing U.S. alcohol from LCBO shelves, blocking U.S. companies from participating in billions of dollars worth of provincial procurement, and going through existing contracts with a fine-tooth comb to see what other deals with the U.S. companies can be canceled. So Doug Ford is having an all-out temper tantrum, doing his best to win this trade war against the United States. And again, I don't think we have the leverage, and I don't even really think it's about the trade necessarily. I think it has more to do with what Trump's saying, the fentanyl, the open borders, and the China infestation, which is the communist Chinese infestation we have in our elected officials, right? And Canada, we are unable to do anything about it. We haven't been able to do anything about it since 2023. We were hopeful that maybe Poilievre would do something about it, but the longer he remains opposition leader, the longer it looks like he's a globalist through and through, right? He's getting a little, well, he can't say anything about anything that's going on. He's still sloganizing, and not actually addressing any of the issues. And so if he's bleeding support, and I don't believe the polls because the polls are ridiculous, but if he's bleeding support, I would say it's because he refuses to address the issues head on and instead sounds like he's repeating talking points that could be said by a liberal. And so it's his fault, I think. Food Professor says this dollar for dollar approach is overly simplistic and highly misleading. It will only end up hurting Canadians. And how can Canada realistically adopt a dollar for dollar strategy against a country that accounts for 25% of the world's economy? Yep. Good question. Daisy says, looks like there are Southern cartels operating in Canada and they're working with the Chinese. And yeah, it does look like that. CBC watchers looking at the Bureau, and this is Sam Cooper's outlet, and they say trade-based money laundering is the fentanyl crisis. Sources expose Chinese, Mexican, Canadian crime convergence. The famous picture of Trudeau at Vancouver dinner with all those Chinese guys, they're all in there. Sources on the United Front, money laundering suspects surveilled by U.S. agency. Donald Trump, because of his intelligence apparatus, is aware of just how bad the infiltration is, just like CSIS is aware, and they're monitoring things. And so, I mean, maybe that's why he's playing with Trudeau, right? Calling him Governor Trudeau and doing all this stuff. But it seems like our turning a blind eye to the open borders has allowed the Mexican cartels to gain a foothold here. Here is one of the leaders of this is Peter Navarro, and he says Canada has been taken over by Mexican cartels. This is a longer video than the next video. The next video is taken from this one, but this adds needed context, I think. So here we go.
Sabers, but I don't want to contribute to that. What I want to say to every world leader who gets up in arms when all we're asking for is fairness and to have them stop killing our people is, please listen to us. Canada could do a lot more. Canada has been taken over, Brett, by Mexican cartels. They bring up these pill presses and printers and the medicines that they fake. You can't tell the difference.
Yeah, it's major
Pharma
problem.
companies can. You need a spectrometer to do their sabers and
Okay, so he's got some details that matter. They've got pill pressers and they've got printers that make counterfeits look like the real thing, and you can't tell. You have to have a special tool, a spectrometer, to tell, and that's very concerning. So David Jacobs is saying this is hyperbolic. He says this is obviously nonsense, but I don't think it's nonsense at all. And he says, let me explain to you why the Trump administration is pushing the fentanyl narrative. I think the Trump administration is exactly right about the fentanyl narrative. And I've often referenced that the USMCA has a clause in it that talks about how if there is national security, if there's drugs or illegals coming across the border, the USMCA specifically makes it legal for whichever country to do what it needs to secure itself. And here is the reference. It says, Article 32.2 of the USMCA trade agreement allows a party to take, quote, any action that it considers necessary for the protection of its essential security interests. The fentanyl angle is the only way they can legally apply tariffs and essentially tear up the existing trade agreement. It's negotiating in bad faith by the Americans, and it would not likely stand up if challenged in court. He's definitely 100% incorrect about that. Here is Tokyo Rosie, and she says TD Bank just paid $3 billion in fines for helping cartels to launder money. So that's one. So he's incorrect, and I don't know if it's on purpose or not, but he's pushing misinformation incorrectly. And then Brittany says, this guy's funny. And she says, El Chapo's son has been in British Columbia for years doing all the crimes. Sad truth about the North, the liberals ruined us. Yeah, son of Mexican cartel leader El Chapo extradited to the U.S. Pretty crazy stuff. And they know, the United States knows all this. They are aware of all this. Navarro is high up. I can't remember what his position is, but he's one of the secretaries who is working on this actively in order to fix the problem, right? Hold on, I'm going to look it up. Okay, he's not a secretary. He's the senior counsel for trade and manufacturing. So he's a highly placed lawyer, and it says on Wikipedia that he's working for Trump and he worked in the last administration as well. So he's somebody who is involved in this situation, and I think that, again, he's interpreting it accurately for his country and saying, listen, like, Canada could do a lot more and they're not doing anything. They haven't even recalled, and this is me now, we haven't even recalled our government to talk about this at all. It's not important, right? If it's not important enough to recall government, then it's not important at all. right? And if that's your litmus test, if you're Trump and that's your litmus test, we haven't even done the basic first step in addressing the issue, period, right? Unbelievable. Kyle says, has Tim Walz ever heard of the Logan Act? So Aaron's reporting, Tim Walz says he called Canadian premiers Doug Ford and Wab Kinew to find a way around Trump's tariffs. While the president may not value the partnerships that contribute billions of dollars to our economy, Minnesota does. And so he's trying to weasel around it. Doug Ford was saying how much he liked Tim Walz. And I thought, yeah, figures, you're liberal. Here's Rachel Parker, and she's reporting this. This is Danielle Smith, and Danielle Smith is not in touch with her constituents. A lot of the people responding to this are disagreeing with what Danielle Smith is proposing here. And Rachel says, no further purchase of U.S. alcohol or new VLTs will be permitted. Danielle Smith says Alberta will no longer buy American alcohol and video lottery terminals to retaliate against President Trump's tariffs. Is this helping or hurting? Well, on the good news, everybody, there's no more video lottery terminals. So that's a societal win, right? Here we go.
Second, no further purchases of U.S. alcohol or new VLTs will be permitted through the AGLC until further notice. We'll just have to drink a bit more BC wine and Alberta craft beer and spirits, and that's just fine with us. Second, no further.
So it sounds like she's falling in line with all of the other premiers. Wab Kinew is doing the same thing. Hold on, I've got to come back to this. Wab Kinew is signing bills the same way. He says, a wonderful, beautiful order pulling American booze off the shelves in Manitoba liquor marts. So we're going to come back to the booze thing. I want to kind of do a quick detour that people are not supporting Danielle Smith in this, especially in Alberta. And this guy yesterday, actually a couple of days ago, I saw it yesterday, but there were tabs that got kind of deleted, and because they were on the end and I didn't see them, and he was one of them. So I wanted to talk about this very quickly. But there's a 51st statehood movement happening in Alberta, and you need to have the support of the premier. And Danielle Smith has been very clear. Jason Levine says, I've now confirmed from several sources that Danielle Smith will not support any conversations to join the U.S. as the 51st state. Catherine was right. He says, we need a new leader. Like Danielle said, they clipped her wings. All right, Alberta, you know what to do. So he's calling for replacement of Danielle Smith, and this guy's talking about how Alberta needs to explore this, and they're sending a delegation down to Washington to talk with Donald Trump's administration. Here we go.
There's a group of Albertans that are working together right now to put together a delegation to go to Washington to talk to the Trump administration about Alberta petitioning for U.S. statehood. It's quite evident that we're being governed by idiots in Ottawa who don't understand that we can't afford a trade war with our largest trading partner, and rather than simply apologizing to President Trump for not meeting our NATO commitments and not adequately securing our border, apparently the Trudeau government has decided to declare a trade war and run up trillions of dollars in costs like they did during COVID on a made-up emergency. So there's a number of us in Alberta that have had enough and want to go speak with the Trump administration about the benefits of Alberta joining the United States.
So there you go. And if Alberta joins the United States, then that will be a big impactful deal, and we'll see how that all plays out. Who knows at this point in time? Things are obviously in flux. And as I've said, I don't know that standard status quo is going to continue, because I don't know that anybody is going to allow it at this point in time. It doesn't seem like Trump wants to allow it. And I mean, the status quo was based on falsehoods, was based on money that we didn't have, all sorts of commitments like what Donald Trump is changing now. If he changes those in a way that can't be changed back, right? And if they are changed back, the American people are going to get pissed. So if those things are changed structurally, we don't have a choice of saying, we're just going to keep this $200 billion you keep sending us that you aren't sending us now that we're real upset about, and keep living as normal. We don't have that choice anymore. You see what I'm saying? So we have to change. There's no choice. We have to change. We have to respond to this. Lisa says, and Lisa is the Pickering city councilor who's not able to be paid because the mayor hates her and has weaponized council against her. And that's a terrifying prospect if you think about it, and nobody's doing anything to stop it. Nobody at any level anywhere. Nobody's talking about it. Nobody cares about it. That's wild. That's incredible. And legally, I mean, she's kind of pooched too, because if she took it to the courts, I think the courts would side with the mayor. And that's terrible because the mayor's wrong. Like, she's right and the mayor's wrong. Anyway, she's highlighting this. She says, who else thinks this is absurd? Back to the alcohol being pulled off the shelves. Do Canadian politicians really think this stunt is sticking it to the Americans? So this is LCBO workers pulling things off the shelf. All of this has been paid for. If you run a store, you have to pay for your inventory, right? And then you sell the inventory to recoup your costs. And usually you sell at a markup and you recoup your costs as you sell the inventory. But we've already paid for all this alcohol. And instead of just saying, we're not going to buy any more, we're not going to sell it anymore either. We're going to take a loss on this inventory. Great. Like, we paid for that. Are you kidding me? The LCBO is now packing up American liquor the taxpayers already paid for instead of selling it and recouping the cost. This is nothing but a waste of public money and a hollow political stunt. If they really wanted to take a stand, they could have just stopped future purchases while selling off existing stock. Instead, they're choosing financial loss over common sense. Government incompetence at its finest. Like, share, and let people know what's really going on. So there you go. Lisa puts it together. And so do you think that the Americans are going to be more upset if they are losing a bit of alcohol revenue, or is Canada going to be more upset if the United States stops buying potash from Saskatchewan and instead buys it from Russia and China? Right? So here's Jason Kenney to highlight this weakness. And he says, I just realized why the Blame Canada bots accounts are cheering U.S. tariffs on Canadian potash. Is anybody cheering that on? U.S. farmers lose, Putin, Lukashenko, and Xi win. And so Canada is the first, like the number one producer of potash. Russia is second. Belarus is third. Russia and Belarus are kind of the same, right? And China is fourth. And so I think that Trump has the ability and the potential to make a deal. Any potash that Canada doesn't send or makes too expensive with tariffs can be easily got from Russia, who is neutral in that, I guess, at this point in time. No tariffs on Russia, right? So it'll be interesting to see. I don't know. Here is the NDP losing their mind about Mr. Sunshine Baby. And he says, when I got invited to attend question period at the BC legislature today, I had no idea that I was going to cause an NDP meltdown. Watch the full clip. He loses his mind a little bit. He kind of does. It's a little weird. So here you go.
I'll tell you what it has to do, Honourable Speaker, because yesterday the person that introduced by this caucus, Honourable Speaker, posted a video that said, the fat pig Doug Ford in Ontario is ready to cut off the power and Liberals are cheering him on. This is quite literally, by definition, an act of war. Honourable Speaker, does the Leader of the Opposition think it's appropriate for a member of his caucus to introduce somebody like that when tariffs are the greatest issue we face?
So, hey, everybody. It seems weird. I don't think the audio was lined up. I hope that's not for the whole video, like my video. So it seems a strange thing to do, to lose your mind that much if somebody who makes internet videos commenting on politics, and like you get that upset about it, especially BC is far away from Ontario, and calling Doug Ford names. Everybody calls politicians names, like Pocahontas. You can even say that during the State of the Union address. Trump called what's her face Pocahontas, and that was hilarious. Everybody was you could hear all the Liberals, Democrats go oh because they wanted that to be bad, but I thought it was hilarious. I thought it was pretty funny. Anyway, regardless, it's interesting to watch all this faux outrage when there's some real outrageous things going on, like they're money laundering, and they're using casinos and real estate to launder drug money in Vancouver, and senators and MPPs or MLAs or whatever, I think they're called MLAs out there, are paid to turn a blind eye, and there's all sorts of crazy stuff going on. And he's upset that Mr. Sunshine Baby called Doug Ford a fat pig. Like, oh my gosh, please park your fake outrage, sir. Juno News is reporting Employment Minister Stephen McKinnon says Parliament does not need to be recalled to provide more support for the workers affected by the U.S. tariffs. He doesn't really say anything more than that. I'm not going to play the video. It's 2 minutes long, and he doesn't really say anything. This chick's talking about how, she's just making this point. I find it interesting. The sentiment is good, and she's a pretty girl, and America and all the rest, and it's good that people are doing this, but it's interesting. The reason I'm showing this to you is because I find it interesting that our political situation is such that we need to make posts like this. Like, hey, our politicians, our leadership, the crazy people at hockey games booing your anthem, that doesn't represent us. Like, we actually don't feel that way. That seems to be something that's being manufactured around us and being attributed to us, but it's not real. And so I think that it's interesting and notable enough to show you that Canadians feel it necessary to tell Americans directly, hey guys, like, we love you. Please don't take this seriously. We don't want to be in a war with you. Okay, here we go.
Hi, I'm Canadian. And on behalf of Canadians, I just want to say that all of those people who are booing the American national anthem, boycotting American products, and participating in all that tomfoolery do not represent the majority of Canadians. We love our American brothers and sisters. And those aren't Canadians. Those are liberals. America, love ya.
Okay. I find it interesting. I just think it's interesting that we're at that point. And there have been times where I've used my show as well to say, like, this doesn't represent us. This doesn't represent most people that I know. You know, like, we're not on board with this, especially during the blaming Russia and Russia. There was not one person that I knew who was genuinely blaming Russia for anything. Most people correctly said, our government seems kind of effed, right? Like, it seems like our government is the one that's the problem. It's not Russia at this point in time anyway. I've seen no evidence to say Russia is the problem in Canada right now. Anyway, people want to blame Russia. Gunther says, Virginia Fox, let's talk about money a little bit. Virginia Fox just forced every last mayor at the hearing to admit just how much they have spent on illegal aliens over the last 4 years. We'll listen to the first 30 seconds here because they do say it. And it's interesting because this maps to Canada because our cities are spending these millions too. Our big cities, Toronto's spending, probably in the same neighborhood as New York's spending. But Canadians are having their tax dollars stolen from them by foreigners in Canada. And that's incredible. Here's one of these hearings recently.
Gentlemen's time's expired. Chair recognizes Dr. Fox from North Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mayor Johnson, in the last 4 years, how much has Chicago spent on care for illegal aliens?
Thank you for that question, Congresswoman. So since 2022, since the governor of Texas began shipping...
Just tell me a number. I don't need a speech. Just tell me a number.
So since 2022, since the governor of Texas was shipping individuals to cities across this country, the city's budget, roughly 1% of the city's budget over the course of 4 years.
Mayor Johnston, the same question, and I don't need a speech, just a number.
Thank you, Dr. Congresswoman. Thank you, Congresswoman. It's $79 million over the last 2.5 years.
Mayor Adams, same question. How much has New York spent to care for illegal aliens?
Approximately $6.9 billion went out of our taxpayers' funds.
Mayor Wu, same question. How much has Boston spent to care for illegal aliens in the last 4 years?
We do not ask about immigration status and giving city services and providing that access, so we do not have a number.
That's an insane way to run things. We don't do any accounting. Next question. What? So the 1% is $574 million for Chicago. Denver said $79 million straight up, and New York is $6.9 billion with a B. And that's a lot of money to take care of non-citizens, and that's theft. How do you get your money back from that, right? Like, how do you begin to recoup those costs? How much would it have cost to ship those people, to deport them and get them out of the country? Probably a lot less than the money they're talking about for putting them up in hotels. Michael says investors are abandoning Canada at alarming rates, monetary again. So the red line is Canadian investors who are leaving the country, and what was baseline at 1,000 in 2010, which is 15 years ago now. 15 years ago, that's wild. So about 1,000 15 years ago is now up above 4,000. Okay. And again, 15 years ago in 2010, the number of companies was around the zero line who were leaving the country. So the 4,000 is the red line on top. And the 2010 divergence leaving the country took a little bit longer, actually. It started happening in 2014, 2015. That's when that happened. And then since then, it's been steadily going to around more than less than 1,000. So, or more than 1,000 businesses have left, right? And so the whole thing is increasing, and it's a very anti-business policies drive a response from business. Business responds to that, and they leave to find places where taxes are cheaper so they can keep more of their money, so they can invest it in themselves to make a better product, to innovate, to continue to make a better product, and so on, right? So Dan says, I expected arrogance from Carney. However, I've been taken aback by the many lies and more recently removal of journalists he doesn't like, where he tries to hide behind campaign staffers because of his lies. Michael Barrett says, 1 week ago, Mark Carney said Canada's economy is weak. Yesterday, he said it's strong. Was he lying then, or is he lying now? We'll come back to this video in just a second, but I'll show you this one. It's tightened up, and 22 seconds. Polyev is doing this attack ad, and it's it's Carney saying exactly the opposite, days apart, right? So March 4th.
I would say as well, our economy is stronger than the American economy in the medium term.
I want to be clear about the, quote, strength of our economy. So our economy was weak before we got to the point of these threats.
You hear the out-of-tune flute playing My Heart Will Go On? That's not by accident. The out-of-tune aspect makes what Carney says sound wrong, and you don't even know why you think it sounds wrong. And the reason it sounds wrong, of course, is because the song sounds wrong. The tuning is just out of tune, right? It's not terribly out of tune. It's just out of tune, enough to recognize the song, but to know that it's wrong, right? And so Carney is, by extension, because the song was weird and sounds wrong, all of his words sound wrong too. And so that's interesting. He's saying Canada's economy is stronger than the United States economy in the medium term. That's insane. That's incorrect. That's not an assessment that's in touch with reality at all. And he's saying that Canada's economy was weak. Yes. Canada is weakening its economy on purpose by putting taxes on our inputs, by saying this thing that you need to run your business that would cost $1 if we weren't taxing it now costs $5. And without that $5, the environment is going to collapse and you're going to die. So you have to pay it or you're going to die. And it's insane. It's absolutely insane. So here's Mark Carney talking about the strength of Canada. This is a minute long. It's still, he sounds a lot like Justin Trudeau. It's a lot of weasel words. So anyway, it's frustrating but it's not Justin Trudeau. So anyway, here's Mark Carney.
Our economy is very strong. Look, and I would say as well, our economy is stronger than the American economy.
So our economy was weak before we got to the point of these threats from President Trump. I want to be clear, and Canadians feel this. I want to be clear about the, quote, strength of our economy. Mm-hmm. Our economy over the last 5 years has been driven by a big increase in the labor force, which was largely because of a surge in immigration that is now trying to be controlled, and by government spending that grew over 9% year after year after year, twice the rate of growth of our economy.
Our economy is very strong.
So our economy was weak before we got to the point.
I don't like when they loop it. If you're going to make your point. You don't need to loop it. So anyway, there's a whole bunch of clips where Mark Carney is talking about how it's a strong, weak economy. Michael Taube says, excuse me, Carney is well on his way to becoming Liberal leader and Prime Minister this weekend. Maybe not. But he's unelected and doesn't have a parliamentary seat. Hence, it's the equivalent of briefing a private citizen on sensitive material. Joly should be reprimanded for this, but she won't be. CP24 is reporting Joly told Liberals that she briefed Carney on Trump tariffs. So, interesting. Why is she briefing Carney on Trump tariffs? Anne says Carney's a private citizen receiving government information from a sitting minister, and he's being given an RCMP detail. Huh. Isn't that weird? That's super weird, right? Stacy says, what do you call it when a Liberal leadership candidate, an unelected private citizen, already has RCMP detail and briefings from the Minister of Foreign Affairs before he's actually won the leadership election? Oh, it's not really an election. It's a pageant? Coronation? What? What did you say? Joly, according to CP24, Joly told Liberals she briefed Carney on the Trump tariffs. So he's just getting briefings left and right. Joly told Liberal MPs at a National Caucus meeting on Wednesday that she'd been briefing Carney ahead of the Sunday vote, according to multiple Liberal sources with knowledge of what happened at Wednesday's virtual National Caucus meeting, including an MP who was there. Joly suggested that she has not yet briefed the other Liberal leadership candidates. Not yet. Oh, right. I was going to do that real... Yeah, it was on my schedule of things to do right after briefing Carney. Juno News says Liberal leadership frontrunner Mark Carney has walked back or, quote, clarified several false claims he's made while on the Liberal leadership campaign trail. And yeah, so walked back, been found out and been embarrassed into, quote, clarifying his lie because he's been lying. Derek Fildeman is responding to himself. And he says, first, Carney banned non-regime reporters from his media availability in Calgary last night. Our Western Standard reporters were nothing but polite and professional, but he just seemed too terrified to face questions from independent media. And then he says, Derek says, when Carney banned Western Standard reporters from his Edmonton event earlier, he lied afterwards and said he had spoken with all the local media. If the Western Standard doesn't count as local media in Alberta, I don't know what does. Well, when Carney says I spoke to all local media, he means local friendly media. He's not talking about unfriendly media, right? You didn't know that? Oh, I thought that was implied. Hello, everyone. Thanks very much for watching. This is just a short version of a longer show. If you'd like to get the whole show, you can go over to CanadaPoly.com and sign up for a subscription. Just look in the drop-down tab for Shop and Donate and look for subscriptions, and you'll get immediate access to the full show. Love to see you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful